Good Erev Shabbos, Parshas Nitzavim. We are the last Shabbos of the year 5781, on the precipice, on the verge of beginning 5782, Rosh Hashanah this coming Monday night. Rav Amiel from Eretz Yisrael, the former chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, notes that Nitzavim, which falls out before Rosh Hashanah, can be understood in the series of parshios that come in these 4 weeks. We have Ki Teitze, Ki Tavo, Nitzavim, and Vayelech. So somewhat homiletically, Rav Amiel says that Ki Teitze and Ki Tavo represent the vicissitudes of life and the hurried nature of daily living, in which it's very difficult, given all the pressures that individuals have, to get through life, to do all the responsibilities, to execute all their responsibilities during their professional years, during their work and professional years, even during their retirement years, and during school years. At whatever stage a person is in life, there are always significant pressures and responsibilities that make it difficult for a person just to simply sit and relax and contemplate and reflect. So Kiseitze and Kisavo reflect to the challenges of daily living, going and coming, Kiteitze, Kitavo. Vayelech, the person who goes on their journey. And there seems to be some level of purpose to that journey. It's Vayelech, he's going. Kiteitze, Kitavo is going in and out, a lot of rushing, a lot of movement, not necessarily on a path. Vayelech is a person's going on a path. But in the middle, you have Nitzavim. Nitzavim means standing. So here we are on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. We have concluded, or just about to conclude, a very, very eventful 5781 in so many ways. And we are called now to Nitzavim. Kiteitze, Kitavo, we've had plenty of that, going back and forth and a lot of challenges. And now, just before Rosh Hashanah, we have Nitzavim. A time to stand, to reflect, to consider, to prepare. And then, Vayelech, we're ready to proceed on our journey. So as these days, we only have a couple of days left, we have an opportunity now, especially with Shabbos, to really take a moment and see if we can get into the mode of Rosh Hashanah. So when we walk in to the Yom Hadin, to the Yemei HaRachamim, to the Yemei Ratzon, in the next 48 hours, 72 hours, we will be properly positioned to plead to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of our families, the community, and indeed all of Klal Yisrael. Nitzavim, however, is interestingly juxtaposed with the previous Sedra, which is all with the section of the Klalas, the curses to Klal Yisrael. And they are pretty harsh, those curses. Rashi, famously citing the Medrash, says that the reason for this juxtaposition of Nitzavim, Atem Nitzavim, and the terrible curses, the decimating, the destructive, the obliterating curses that are mentioned in the last Sedra, is to make the following point: that even though you, Klal Yisrael, may have suffered tremendously as a consequence of these olas, of these klalas, nevertheless, atem nitzavim hayom kulchem. You're standing here. You're straight. You haven't been decimated. You haven't been destroyed. You haven't been entirely obliterated from the face of the earth. You might have suffered, and suffering is a consequence of the actions and choices that we of Klal Yisrael have chosen, but you're still here. Now, although there might be some level of consolation to that, Shem Yishmuel, citing the Kli Yakar, asks the following: what exactly is the point of this medrash here? Is if Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the people, "Don't worry, you're still here, and there's not a problem." Well, where were they? They were at the end of 40 years in the Midbar. And then at the end of those 40 years, they were standing on the precipice, ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. So and they had not been decimated, or they did not receive the terrible klalas that were mentioned in the previous Sedra. So either this means that they hadn't reached the point in which they deserved such a punishment, in which case, what's Moshe Rabbeinu saying? Or if they did reach that point in which they deserved such punishment, and they didn't get it, then this is just an empty threat. The whole purpose of Moshe sharing these words to Bnei Israel is as his ethical will, his last will and testament to tell the people, follow Dvar Hashem, so that way you don't suffer. So what's the point of saying, Atem Nitzavim, you're still here, you're still standing, you're still strong? Bnei Israel thought they couldn't withstand it, and Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, no, you can stand, you can withstand it. But they didn't receive it, either because they didn't meet the threshold, or if they met the threshold, then this would just be an empty threat, and the purpose of the educational purpose that Moshe meant to impart to them would be entirely lost. So what exactly is going on here? The Shem Mishmuel suggests that one can answer this based on an insight of Rabbunim Peshischa in next week's Sedra Vayelech. And there Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, that after you, Moshe Rabbeinu, die, the people will stray, and they will sin, and great calamity will befall them. And the people will acknowledge the great calamity is a consequence of their having lost loyalty to Hashem and strayed from their fidelity to the Ribono Shel Olam. And they will say to themselves, Ein Elokai b'kirbi. Hashem is not with me, and this is the cause for the terrible troubles that have befallen us. And indeed, the pasuk continues in next week's Sedra. Hashem says, Vanochi haster ester panai, that I, Hashem, will indeed cover my face. I will veil myself. I will be somewhat separated and distant from Bnei Israel. And they will be left to the vicissitudes of a harsh world. That's what the pasuk says. However, Rabbunim Peshischa says that is not necessarily the precise read of the pasuk. Let's read it this way. The people will say, Ein Elokai b'kirbi, God is not with me, means that God is not with me at all. And as a consequence, our relationship has been entirely severed. And look at all these calamities that are befalling us. It is because Hashem has severed the relationship. Ein b'kirbi, Hashem is no longer with me. And Hashem says, however, but, it's not an and, the next pasuk that follows, it's a but. But I say, Anochi haster panai, I am not going to sever the relationship. I am simply going to veil the relationship. It will be somewhat strained. It will be somewhat distant, but not entirely broken. Simply hester panim. Hester panim means Hashem veils his face, as it were, and we are indeed left to suffer great calamity. But that is a consequence of the choices that we make. However, even with all that, the relationship remains. And if the relationship remains, it means there's a possibility to climb back and to repair that relationship, to reform and repair it such that we can have a close relationship once again with Hashem and be the recipients of Hashem's blessings. Ein Elokai b'kirbi, God is not with me. That's Bnei Israel's fallacy. But I say, Va'anochi, but I say, haster ester panai. I'm simply going to be separated, distant, and veiled from them, never disconnected. And this, the Shem Mishmuel says, is how we can understand Atem Nitzavim. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Bnei Israel, Atem Nitzavim hayom kulchem. The people heard all these great curses and said, how will we possibly be able to withstand anything like this? If Hashem does this, it means we are done. We have no relationship, and we fear the relationship being severed. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, no. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem. You stand before Hashem on this very day. And regardless of what happens,
even if you, as a consequence of your choices, bring about terror, the promised calamity that Bnei Yisrael is promised, if they stray, and if Bnei Yisrael fails to live up to the pledge of loyalty to the Ribono Shel Olam, if that indeed does happen, know one thing: you're not gone. The relationship is not severed. As bad as it might seem in the here and now, there is a way forward and a way backward. And in fact, the way forward is the way backward. And the way backward is the way forward. To go back to Hashem, to return to Hashem, to return to our roots, to return to fidelity and loyalty to the mitzvos and Torahs Hashem, and Ritzon, the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the way forward. Atem Nitzavim hayom kulchem. Never despair that the relationship is broken, because there is always a way back. There is always a way forward. On this eve of Rosh Hashanah, perhaps Atem Nitzavim, as we are standing and contemplating and not moving and not rushing and not running around, in these last hours, we can consider this important message of the Shem Mishmuel and remind ourselves that as far as we think we may have strayed, there is always a road back. Good Shabbos.